cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity. These are not pathologies out there. These are pathologies of skeletal muscle. And now with the use of GLP-1s, we are now entering almost what I believe is going to be a repeat of history. If we don't recognize that muscle is at the focal point, we're going to swap obesity for sarcopenia right before our eyes.
She is a New York Times bestselling author.
She's an expert in geriatrics, in nutrition, in health and longevity.
She coined the term muscle-centric aging, and she has the Muscle-Centric Institute.
Dr. Gabrielle Lyon.
Muscle is the organ of longevity.
Your body armor against injury, your body armor against disease, and it's your protection mechanism both mechanically and metabolically. The fastest way to become free is to move your body, and your mind will follow.
How do you define fitness? And he said, being useful.
Gabrielle, welcome to the Ready State podcast. And I just want to start by saying this is long overdue. Kelly and I have been such a fan of you and your work, and we're very influenced by your first book, Forever Strong. And we're just so excited to have you here today.
The feeling is mutual. And the podcast is Ready State. I'm ready. Put me in.
Let's go. Are you ready? Are you ready?
You have young children and a busy partner, and you're putting another book out. It's impossible. I don't know how you are at the margins, and it actually sets it up perfectly. We feel like there's this conversation about longevity and durability, but we feel like people are really on the margins of having zero additional bandwidth. And we feel like the story is that you're like, oh, you're doing good. You're a little perfect routine and you're barely holding on. And then someone gets sick, and then there's a deadline, and then you have a kid, and then there's a big project, and then someone goes to med school, and it wipes out your capacity. And really, one of the stories that you're telling, which I really want to get into, is that you have to put the time in to build this resilience. And I think you've kind of hit on a secret way to do that we've all sort of known, but you've really given voice to.
I really appreciate it. And what I hear a lot, so I actually still see patients in our medical practice. And the reality is people say, well, I don't have time to train, or I don't have time to dial in my nutrition. But the alternative is you don't have time to get all the things that you're talking about, like getting sick or getting injured. This is the most time-saving entity, you're human, to invest in that one could ever. That and, of course, relationships.
Yeah. Right.
Jacked and socially strong.
For our, you said you're still seeing clients or patients, but for our listeners who are meeting you for the first time, how do you introduce yourself, and what kind of doctor are you? Just like a little backstory. And then what is your day-to-day life like? Like, what is professionally, like, what are you doing on a daily basis? I imagine
lots of push-ups.
Every day is different.
Lots of push-ups. Well, I've been a huge fan of both of yours for years. To say it's been a handful of years would actually be an understatement. I'm talking about the Charles Poliquin days. So for years and years, which is extraordinary. When you talk about durability and longevity, I think that that's what you guys have done for people. I'm a physician. I'm a traditionally trained physician. However, my background is in human nutrition, vitamin, mineral metabolism. And I just happen to be lucky to have started my nutritional training very early on. Did my undergraduate in nutrition and vitamin, mineral metabolism, just so happens by one of the godfathers of protein metabolism, to just kind of set the stage, because there's a lot of talk about how physicians aren't trained in nutrition, or they're not trained in some of the things that they're talking about. And that may be true, but certainly I've dedicated my life to that. And then, I went to the University of Illinois. Have you guys been to Illinois before?
No,
there's lots of cornfields and nothing else, and tornado warning. So there's absolutely nothing to do.
That's what Illini actually means, tornado warning.
And it also means boring, cold, miserable winters. And I remember I was in the nutrition class because I was studying to become a dietitian, and there was a tornado warning, and we all have to go to the fallout shelter. I was there for 2.5 hours, and I felt completely useless. And if anybody knows me personally, being useful is a core value, which sounds silly, but also true.
I love that.
No, it's a great core value.
So listen, if there's an apocalypse, come over to my house. I got everything. We are completely covered. Uh,
Yeah. Kelly and I always
Geor-
say we have like a lot of protein powder in a pool. So there's like enough water and protein
Yeah,
powder to go a long
George
way, right?
Hebert, who's the founder of MoveNet, someone asked, like, he's like, "How do you define fitness?" And he said, "Being useful." I love
I
that
think it's
definition, and I love that way of
I think it's
describing yourself.
true, and I think as humans, we are very disconnected from the idea of being of service. We're all in our little microcosms. But I think in order to truly live a fulfilled life, which is both physical, mental, and all the components that ride along with that, there is at its core being useful to other humans. So I was in a fallout shelter thinking, wow, I'm completely effing useless right now. I need to go to medical school. So if there isn't any kind of emergency, then I can be able to do something about it. So that obviously changed the trajectory of my training. I then went to medical school. I did, and I'll fast forward to the relevant part, but I did 2 years of psychiatry, 3 years of family medicine. And then when I was finishing, my choice was either I'm going to go into the Navy or I'm going to go do a fellowship. My mentor said, well, if you want to really move the needle in nutritional sciences and muscle, then you really have to go back to training. And of course, this is after 4 years, 4 years of medical school plus 5
Yeah.
years of postgraduate training on a salary of like $45,000 a year for the last almost decade of my life. And I thought to myself, Navy or fellowship? Well, I decided on fellowship. So then I went to Wash U and studied both nutritional sciences and geriatrics, which is in essence the study of longevity and aging. Fast forward, here we are now thinking about muscle as a movement and really a new language of this idea of longevity in medicine.
So, as you're now focused on practicing muscle centric medicine, which is a phrase I love and I've heard you say, and maybe you could define that, but when you first began in medicine, did you have sort of an idea of what a successful patient outcome looked like? And as you transition to focusing more on muscle centric medicine, did that successful patient outcome become a completely different thing?
Yes, and to be fair, I hated medical school and I thought about quitting at least 500 times. And it was very different. Obviously, if someone is physically active and interested in wellness and health, studying the pathology of everything that possibly goes wrong is the last place you want to be. And in my mind, at that time, I was still training. I've always been training. When I was 5, I was doing 10-mile bike rides with my dad. To this day, I don't like to go visit him because he lives in Ecuador. And if you have the opportunity, if it's 4 hours and under by foot, we have to walk. I never go visit him. Terrible.
Love it. I love it.
Bless
Yeah.
that man.
He's my kind of guy because I love walking.
You just I want to just circle back on something that you just kind of threw out there. You just threw out this legend, Charles Poliquin, and a lot of people have no idea how we got here today in terms of the language that we're using, the things that we understand, the giants of shoulders on whom we're standing. Shout out phosphatidylserine. Thank you, Poliquin. But you hinted at being a user in a time when it was really obscure. Poliquin is deep nerd, deep performance. And it's the very beginning of talking about biooptimization and looking at what are best practices. You just hinted at that you've been active your whole life, but no one just stumbles into that world. And then that's the lens through which you go to med school and all this advanced experience, plus, understanding your partner. This is crazy. Like you're a unicorn in that sort of lineage. We talk a little bit about that.
Well, surprised and almost embarrassed that you kind of made that connection. But I believe that we all have a certain, without being kind of weird, like a dharma, that we are meant to do this kind of work. And from a very early age, I knew that my job was to be able to help people become the strongest, most capable version of themselves. And so when I was in medical school, I don't even know, I met Charles easily over 10 years ago when I was just starting and thinking. So muscle-centric medicine, and I'll get to where this goes, is the idea that muscle is the largest organ system in the body. Out of aesthetics, outside of cosmetics, outside of power and strength, that skeletal muscle as an endocrine organ system is our focal point. Just like the heart has cardiologists and the endocrinologists study the thyroid, muscle is its own living, breathing, dynamic entity. And I created the field of muscle-centric medicine. And in my first interface, I needed to find people that didn't think I was crazy, that didn't think that I was just some weirdo. Here I am, this, young female physician who is into muscle, obviously not too jacked and tan, but coming at it through the lens of actually medicine. So as it exists right now, there's the lens of strength and conditioning. We need that. But then there is this whole other side, and this whole other side that looks at muscle from a medical standpoint. This idea of Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity. These are not pathologies out there. These are pathologies of skeletal muscle first. They largely begin in
Wow.
skeletal muscle decades before. And so this entity, the way medications affect it, the way that all of the inputs that we think about traditional medicine, how this affects the cardiovascular system or the thyroid or the hormones, all affect muscle very uniquely. And so Charles didn't think I was crazy. And Charles said to me, and obviously for those that you don't know, I was actually with him 2 weeks before he passed away.
Mm.
He said, Gabrielle, you're onto something and this is the future. And I said, Charles, well, tell me 3 people that you think I should meet. And do you know who is also on that list? You guys.
No way.
And Mark Bell. And Mark.
Okay, I just got some
also
chills.
Mark
All
Bell
right.
was on that
that's
list.
amazing.
So you guys are on
Wow.
that list. Mark Bell and, Super Training was on that list. And there was one other person who was this peptide pharmacist on the list.
That's a crazy story.
I'm just gonna out myself, and I say this inappropriate thing whenever I can. And people are like, "Hey, what?" Like people are like, "What's the secret?" I'm like, "Oh, everyone just needs cocaine and steroids. Like if you want to be the best, like." And literally that is obviously not true, everyone. But the idea is that like you need to be more awake and lucid, and you need to really lean into this thing that you are built to move, full stop. And I love this because I really do think we've put such a primacy, a need on function, right? That's the reason, and it's really been hijacked by aesthetics. I think that's really a big kind of missing conversation. But however we get there, when we get there, but this piece that you're describing, it was missing from my PT school. It was missing from my grad education. We didn't talk about it, and even just recently, we've learned that like the muscle is responsible for a ton of stem cells that go in and heal bones. And like, I mean, if you don't flex the muscle, you don't heal. I mean, we're learning things about this incredible endocrine system, even in the last year.
Are you ready for this? I just want to point something out. In the 70s, when the obesity epidemic, people started to understand what was happening. From the 70s, it was all about obesity and fat tissue. Muscle and movement wasn't even part of the conversation because because movement hadn't really changed. And then finally in the 2000s, when obviously nothing was working, they started to understand that muscle played a role in metabolic health. And that was 25 years ago. That's it. So,
Right.
and
That's insane.
if I were to kind of foreshadow, which I don't want to do, at that time in the 70s, muscle was completely irrelevant to the conversation. Nobody thought about it. And now with the use of GLP-1s, we are now entering almost what I believe is going to be a repeat of history. If we don't recognize that muscle is at the focal point, we're going to swap obesity for sarcopenia right before our eyes.
This episode of the Ready State podcast is brought to you by Vitality Blueprint. And it's January, and many of us are thinking about either New Year's resolutions or kind of focused specifically on our health.
Whatever. I'm in my 50s. I have to focus on my health.
And one of the things you and I have been doing once or twice a year since as long as I can remember is a pretty comprehensive blood panel once or twice a year. And, we really are believers that you have to kind of get some information about what's going on under the hood if you want to really sort of start to address your overall health and performance. And, we are just stoked to be partnered with Vitality Blueprint, which is run by our friends Dr. Andy Galpin and Dan Garner, who are both geniuses.
Yeah, savages.
Yeah.
One of the things that you and I feel strongly about here at the Ready State is that we are all about assessment and then application, not playing press and guess. And if I drop into a typical person and I'm like, hey, can I see your supplements? Can I see your lifestyle? It's all press and guess. Like, they don't know. I mean, we have best principles, right? Fruits and vegetables, do I sleep?
Right.
But really, the blood tells the story about your history, what's going on, where you are. And people don't realize that there are small hinges that open enormous doors. And that's what's really cool about the application of this very high performance sort of analysis of people's blood applied to mere mortals like me. It's like I actually get real insights that I can't get from just 1,000 dumb tests.
Yeah, and one of the things that you can do is actually take your blood work from another provider, even your primary care physician, and upload it into Vitality's system, and then you get access to all of this awesome interpretation and advice about how to improve these markers. Yeah, and one of the things we talk about a lot in the supplement space is about how there are some basic supplements probably everybody should be taking, but then beyond that, it really does depend on, like, do you have a deficiency? So, it's really important to know, like, are you vitamin D deficient? And if so, like, vitamin D is definitely a supplement that should be on your list, but you can't know that unless you get
100%.
the test.
And Vitality is the highest expression of this. And I think it's super reasonable. Check it out for yourself, vitalityblueprint.com/TRS. And here's the deal. Use code TRS for $50 off any Vitality plan.
These guys are legit.
Do it.
We're very stoked.
And
You mean going to or are?
Yeah, or are. Wow. I mean, there's so much there. And before we move on, I just want to go back to this on the practical side. As a muscle-centric physician, what does that look like for your patients? If I were to book an appointment with you, would it be because I have a specific issue? And tell me what that looks like, because we obviously understand the lens of, muscle from a strength and conditioning standpoint. But tell us more from a practical standpoint. Like, what does that look like for a patient who comes to see you?
Our medical practice is actually called Strong Medical, which is kind of cool. And people can find it on my website, which is drgabriellelyon.com. And I will also say, Rob Wolf, who has been a great friend of yours, we have helped take care of Rob. He just sent me a Substack that he wrote all about healing from this gastrointestinal problem. So we do everything. Again, muscle is the focal point, and there's a number of reasons as to why one would come into our clinic. The first reason is people have been to 13 other physicians and there's no answer. I am myself.
We relate to that.
Myself and my team, Dr. Lisa is our lead doctor. She's also my personal physician, are relentless. And my practice actually started with elite operators. So the tier 1 operators that would go to Mayo Clinic and go to all these different places and would never get answers. They would get the lab values that would come back and say, well, everything is normal. And obviously these guys and their entire platoon, and then their wives and their families, everything kind of derailed. So there was a component of people have been to multiple physicians and everything is normal. And then they would come into our practice, whether it was Lyme, chronic fatigue, environmental exposures, a lot of gut issues, relentless in figuring it out beyond just traditional testing. And so that's really where the practice originated. Forward facing, people will think about the practice as, I want to change my body composition. And we absolutely do that. So whether someone is really, really sick and they want to come to us, or someone is like, I really want to change my body composition. I don't want to age the way that I saw my parents age. And I want to actually put on muscle and rework this idea of getting older as becoming this downfall of some aging trajectory. So we do all of that.
So you and I have connected on Instagram about this, but I am obsessed with your quote, muscle is the organ of longevity. Like, I think I've said it on like 10 Instagram
we quote
videos.
you.
Like, I quote it all the time. And
The starts are here.
Yeah. And
Cue up the line quote.
And I feel like it's such a disruptive idea. I mean, it really does. It does make a lot of sense to me that it's just been in the last 25 years that, muscle as this key endocrine system has really kind of come to the fore. But, when just tell me a little bit about that
Yeah.
and assume that our listeners are probably people in their 30s to 70s who are definitely interested in health, but why in your view is muscle like the thing, which I agree with you, by the way, but
Yeah.
tell us more.
I had always an inkling, and I think that you guys can probably appreciate this as your practice and your work in the world has evolved. It was I'd always been focused on muscle. And the reality is, I was very focused on it through a youthful lens, meaning, whatever, I'm in my 20s and then I'm in my 30s, and, muscle is so great. It's going to be there forever. And I'm just going to be jacked and tan, eat protein, do push ups. Then I did my fellowship in geriatrics. And holy cow, was I unprepared and ill prepared, both
Yeah.
mentally
Yeah.
and physically, for number one, what I was about to enter into and see. I was absolutely faced with my own mortality, rounding on 30 patients a day that were all on their deathbed. I did palliative care. I did nursing home rounds on the weekends. I would reintroduce myself to these patients that couldn't feed themselves and their families. And the devastation that I saw over 2 years, it took me triple that amount of time to be able to even overcome that, right? From having just dreams about it. And people are gonna be like, you're a doctor, you're supposed to be able to do that. And I would say, if you are someone who cares about humanity, you are not prepared. No human is prepared if they are connected to their fellow man to see that. And I'm like, oh man, we have this all wrong. As we sit here and we talk about obesity and we are, doing your cardiovascular activity, I would round on these patients. One, right there, there's no conversation of resistance training. There's no care about their muscle. It's every organ system. I'm running on these nursing homes. You get a call at 2 a.m. This patient that you've been seeing for 2 years falls and breaks a hip. And the next thing you know, you're at their friggin' funeral. And we missed it. And that has become the norm. And it's not. So, as I started seeing this and then seeing the impact that it had on the families and the patient and myself, as a fellow, as someone who's doing advanced training, we all get a project. And my project that I chose was looking at body composition and brain function. How did I tie my geriatric training with my training in nutrition? As I was, advancing, I went to WashU, which is the Midwest, another very rigorous school. And I saw this one woman, she was in her mid-50s, and she's like so bubbly and a dark curly hair and just talking about her kids. And I imaged this woman's brain, and her brain looked like an Alzheimer's brain, the beginning of an Alzheimer's brain. And why? She was metabolically unhealthy. She had gone through the same yo-yo dieting, and every time she did what the doctors told her, she lost more muscle and put on fat. And I couldn't live with myself. I'm like, we can't. And then I went to my colleagues. I'm like, hey guys, this is what I'm seeing. And what is our answer to this? And they were like, well, this is just the way that it is. Do some, aerobics or jog and, eat the food guide pyramid. And that wasn't good enough for me. And so, you asked this question. This is the longest answer of where I came up with this idea that muscle is the organ of longevity. It wasn't through flowers and unicorns. It was through seeing a lot of death and pain and seeing how the medical establishment had made multiple mistakes over multiple decades.
Wow, it's a lot. So I would love if you could talk about like and maybe we could just choose one of these things that we all fear in getting older. And I think the one that comes to mind for many of us is dementia or
Yeah.
Alzheimer's.
My deadlift going down, but carry on.
Kelly. Yeah, besides Kelly's deadlift going down and dying of a tooth abscess, those are two.
You got to
Kelly's two
definitely
biggest
fix
fears.
that, Kelly. That's like not a good look for anybody.
Yeah. I would just love to, if you could really talk like deep science on how does having muscle mass potentially prevent you from getting something like dementia or Alzheimer's.
It's called
like,
Frey.
And
Yeah,
and
but,
there,
you know,
and it's
Give us the
Yeah,
details.
and I'm sorry that this sounds depressing, and, I'm sure that people
No.
come to you because they wanna hear how to be mobile and how to be more like the supple leopard and yes, and if we don't face the realities of where the majority of our population is going, then we never get to course correct. And if we take a big step out and we think, "Okay, well, what does muscle do?" Muscle, we know for that mobility part, the strength and Kelly's deadlift. But then what else does it do? And what are the unique characteristics of muscle? And I would say that the following. Well, muscle is your primary metabolic sink. Healthy muscle at rest doesn't actually burn much carbohydrates. It burns primarily fat, which people are often really surprised. But it is the place where you dispose of carbohydrates that you're eating. Okay. Also, it is your amino acid reservoir, meaning those proteins, your body it's not this on off switch. Your body is always going through turnover. At night, when you're not eating, all the enzymes in your body, everything requires these proteins, these amino acids, everything. So it is your body armor against injury, your body armor against disease, and it's your protection mechanism, both mechanically and metabolically. So that's another aspect. And then, as an endocrine system and as this entity that houses stem cells and immune cells, the more healthy muscle mass you have, the greater your survivability against nearly all cause disease. And in fact, and I'll just throw this one more thing out there. We just published a paper, myself and my colleagues at Baylor. I was the senior author, and it looked at the relationship, every guy is going to like this, between sexual function and muscle mass and strength. And guess what? While those urologists think something else is the organ of longevity, it just so happens that the more healthy muscle mass you have, the greater your sexual function. And that's because it helps with endothelial function, which is, the health of your arteries, and it helps with blood flow and helps with metabolic health. So if you want good erections, have good healthy muscle.
And by the way, I don't think this is depressing at all. I find this to be fascinating, and fascinating that it is really just such a new. It's just so new, which is really amazing. Like, it's amazing to me that this hasn't been part of the conversation for the last 50 years. And as someone who was a part of the sort of, Kelly and I call it the diet wars, like. I've told a lot of people on this podcast, but I was a Division I rower at Berkeley during the low fat diet
Yes.
craze time, and Kelly and I were
You
like,
mean low fat, low protein?
low fat, low protein. So, I mean, I look back in horror at how I was able to function as an athlete, living on like bagels and red vines.
Sounds kind of
But,
good.
fortunately,
And
human
mochas.
beings are human beings are resilient. But one of the things that I'm seeing, and, I do feel, and I know from the data, in terms of women in particular being interested in going to gyms and signing up for gyms, and specifically stating that resistance training is something they want to do. I know lots more women are doing it. And I still at the same time feel like a lot of women, maybe even a majority still, really fear resistance training. And I think that's part of the
You
reason
think if
why.
you're resistance training,
Or no, it's about aesthetics. It's
not familiar with resistance training and worried about changing
worried.
their
And so
way they look.
And I also think that's part of the reason why Pilates has had this huge explosion, because I think there's a lot of women who are like, okay, like I can't just, blow myself out running or doing cardio. So, and I know I need to do something resistance training. And I hear that Pilates will give me long, lean, toned muscles, which all are things that make no sense. And so I'm going to try Pilates, right? And I see this in my own community. We live in Marin County, where it's an affluent suburb of San Francisco, and I see a lot of women in particular consuming this information. I think now really knowing even how important muscle is, but somehow not being able to get over this mental hurdle of thinking, okay, I can't get over the aesthetic piece that I'm going to start to look muscular, which is a way I don't want to look.
No, I have,
And I imagine you experience this as well. And I know in Forever Strong, you talk about how important identity is here. And so I'm sure that could be layered into this. But what is your approach? And is it just because we're early and that we're eventually going to convert people and it's just a matter of time? Or how do you approach sort of this like resistance to resistance
It's a
training?
great question. And there is the PC answer, which is the soft answer, like, okay, ladies, you're not going to get too bulky and just do it anyway. It's going to be okay. So that is the answer that I think people like to hear. But the real answer is the following. Is it that you can't or that you won't? Can you be too rich, too pretty, too young? Like, is that going to happen? Or too jacked? The reality is no. There's no one or 95% of the population, aside from my husband, who looks at a weight and becomes jacked. We're past that. So is it a narrative so that if I choose to believe that, then that means I don't have to do it and I'm not accountable for doing that because I am anchored in this one belief? Because I would say, ladies, if you're listening to this, please name one woman that you know that has become too bulky. I'll wait, just one. Moving on.
Right. And you're like, you're still waiting.
But I mean, is it, again, so is this a repetitive conversation because it's a true fear, or is it, hey, you know what, if I believe this, then I don't have to do it? Okay, I mean, maybe. So let's say we've surmounted that hill and now we're done, and now everybody who's listening to this hates me and they thinks I'm such a jerk. Okay, fine. Well, I will say that it is a non-negotiable. And if Pilates was enough, then we would have our astronauts and our SEALs and our, all of these people that put their life on the
Ooh, I love
line
that answer.
just doing Pilates.
Yes. You do Pilates and go to the Olympics.
That's all you do. But the other thing that I'll say, Callie, one more thing.
No, please,
We've been
please.
lifting weights our whole life. I have a toddler that's 50 pounds. I have a lot of groceries and a lot of luggage, I move furniture. I've been doing this my whole life. And every single person listening to this show has been lifting weights their whole life. Period. End of story.
Right. It may not be a barbell, but you are lifting. I love that.
One of the things that I think is I call it extra fitnessing. We're doing fitness-like activities that is like a hobby. And I'll put it into like, hey, what do you do for enjoyment? I go dancing. Like, I'm like, okay, dancing is not fitness and strength conditioning. It's dancing. It's great. And I'm all for it. I feel like a lot of exercises become entertainment, and I'm going to call it exercising because it doesn't meaningfully move the needle on bone density. It doesn't meaningfully move the needle. I mean, I tried all the Vivactin, ate all the calcium chews, didn't work. It doesn't put that lean muscle mass on. Can you quantify what a healthy muscle mass is? Because this is something that I think people haven't wrapped their head around. It would be great. I think more people could understand, like, oh yeah, okay, body fat, this range, that's decent.
Right, and everybody's starting to get a DEXA scan, or not everyone, but a lot of people are getting
And then
one.
all
So
they look at is
the bone density.
bone density, which is great. First step first, but quantify how much lean muscle, and I mean fatty muscle, I'll take just muscle, how much muscle you have.
This episode of the Ready State podcast is brought to you by LMNT. And here we are in the middle of winter.
It's dark.
It's dark and sad. We're on the uptick. We're on the uptick since this January, but it's dark and cold.
Yeah, and what we see is that oftentimes you're not getting the signaling from light, you're feeling a little groggy, and what you're doing is reaching for coffee. Well,
Or candy.
maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm reaching for coffee all day long. I'm like, let's have another Americano.
Yeah.
The problem that we're going to help you solve today is that all of this caffeine afternoon is wrecking your sleep.
Yeah.
It's making it hard to go to sleep, and it's disrupting the quality.
Yeah,
of
which
sleep.
like each passing year of our life, we move our like last caffeine early. It used to be like 2 or 3, and now it's noon.
3, I'd be like 4 o'clock.
Yeah, but
I'd even have espresso before I go to bed.
But sometimes it's cold. You need a little bump at 4 o'clock, and that's where we always bring in the hot element these days. I mean, we always both have a huge cup of hot element at the office or when we're working at home that we're just sipping on all day, and it really does make a difference. And, it's like you're still at work and it's dark and it feels like it's 10 o'clock at night. And somehow that hot element at 3 or 4 in the afternoon
Change
helps us get through.
Number 1, you're going to get less caffeine. early in the day, which we need to do. And number 2, I guarantee you're not drinking enough water in this cold, because we have to remind all our winter
And on top of that, you're getting some nice salt and magnesium and potassium. And it tastes so good.
Stop it. It's not about
It's so good.
It's never about
It
taste.
tastes so
It's all about performance. Right now, if you order through our link, you can get a free sample of LMNT's most popular drink mix flavors. Of course, if you want to party in your mouth, try the sparkling. Go to drinklmnt.com/TRS.
We literally drink it every day.
Hey, if you're enjoying the show, make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts. That way you won't miss any of the new episodes we drop. Plus, it really helps other people find the show. So hit that follow button now, and let's get back to it. What does that look like if I'm having that conversation?
Let's frame the conversation before I give you a direct answer as to what the landscape is. So BMI, body mass index, was meant to find information, population-based information. So it's like this height, weight situation where someone like you guys would be considered overweight or obese because you have muscle. It is population-based information, not very helpful. People still look at BMI. We've all recognized that there are limitations. Move to body fat percentage, which is DEXA. DEXA is this machine that will show the body in compartments. It shows how much bone density you have, how much fat mass, and then extrapolates lean body mass. Lean body mass includes everything beyond bone and fat. It includes organs, it includes everything. It doesn't tell you how much skeletal muscle mass you have. So we think that it's about 40% of lean body mass. That's terrible. The idea that we have decades of research based on a estimate. Okay, just throwing that out there.
Right.
We have an idea of what percent body fat is unhealthy, but we don't really have an idea of what percent healthy muscle mass would actually be valuable for people. And I'm going to take a step further. Roughly, it should be 40% body weight. Great. Is that a great estimate? I mean, we have some frailty index, but all of that is based on disease. So we don't actually have a scale in which we can say this is the optimal amount of muscle. Nobody can say that. Now, one step further, here's where I think the future is, because this is what I think the most meaningful number is. Frankly, I don't think body fat matters almost at all. I don't think it matters. I think it's almost an irrelevant bystander. I think what really matters is—
Wait, we're just going to pause. Let everyone's mind unexplode for a second. Okay,
body fat
carry
doesn't
on.
matter. Body fat is irrelevant. Whether you're 30%, 20%, it doesn't matter. The real pathology is the intermuscular fat. The real pathology that has metabolic outcomes is actually the fat in the muscle, which we don't measure for. It's still within research, but that's actually what is most fat. And if Charles was here, he would be like, see, I knew you went to school for a reason. Because it's the percentage of intermuscular adipose tissue. So there's inter and intra, and it's that percentage that likely pushes negative metabolic outcomes. So for example, let's just say we have a lineman that's 30% body fat. And then we have another person who's sedentary with 30% body fat. Both have the exact same weight and the exact same, quote, muscle. But the lineman has an intermuscular adipose tissue that's really low, meaning their muscle looks like a fillet, not a Wagyu steak, versus the sedentary person with 30% body fat. Now, they both have the same, with a muscle that looks like a Wagyu steak that has elevated levels of glucose, elevated levels of insulin, elevated levels of triglyceride. Both appear to have 30% body fat. One is metabolically healthy. One is metabolically unhealthy. That is the number that matters. It's the intermuscular adipose tissue. That is going to be what determines in the next 5 years if we're healthy or not.
Amazing.
So that intramuscle adipose tissue, it seems like not being sedentary is a one way to avoid
It's
it.
the way.
But how well it is the way. So it's I'm assuming it's movement, it's resistance training, it's cardiovascular exercise. It's sort of like the triad of movement that, we are all promoting that everybody
Yes.
does. But I don't think people think about that, right? You're like, oh my God, I'd want to try to avoid having this
But
intramuscular
here's
fat,
the thing that's
basically.
so extraordinary, and this is what actually becomes empowering. And I learned this because I was on my own podcast, which you guys are going to be coming on. I have these world leading experts. I have these innovators, and I had an MD, PhD, who's the world leading expert on PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, the number one cause of female infertility. And I was like, Dr. Cree, what percent body fat is totally screwing people up? She goes, Gabrielle, has nothing to do with body fat. It has to do with the intramuscular adipose tissue that we see under MRI, that when people are exercising, we see decreases, regardless if body fat percentage changes. So I need everybody to hear me, because if we then move from muscle as this performance organ system, which it is, I mean, listen, everybody wants to be better, or at least I do, right? Wants to be better at movement. The simple act of engaging in resistance training, and I cover this in my playbook, 3 days a week, a 3-day a week plan, the simple act of contracting that skeletal muscle, whether you increase your muscle mass or you decrease body fat, will improve the quality of the muscle tissue, which then has a downstream effect on cardiovascular disease, sexual function, diabetes, Alzheimer's, because that simple act of taking voluntary control by 3 days a week of resistance training, throw in some VILPA, some vigorous intermittent activity. Like after this, I'm going to do some push-ups and maybe some jump around something, improves the intramuscular adipose tissue like that.
So, you know what this makes me think of, and this is not science, but my mom's best friend, my mom is now in her 80s, and her best friend, Linda, I think is 82. And all of our childhood, Linda was like by far my mom's most athletic friend. And at the same time, she was always probably like 20 pounds overweight. So never obese, but like a bigger woman, right? And it's been really interesting to watch them all age and see my mom's friend Linda, actually now in her 80s, looks to be like, to me, by far the most durable of all of them. Because she's gotten a little older, she does actually look a little bit leaner. But I feel like she's sort of an example of that. Like she was someone who maybe on the surface did not look jacked and tan, but because she was so athletic, my guess is that she had very little intramuscular adipose tissue, and has aged so well and so durably, both physically and mentally, but definitely does not have the kind of like body aesthetically that we think we're looking for. I mean, I don't know if that's,
Yeah.
again, not science, but that's what I thought of when you were
This
talking
is an
about
important point, because now this brings back performance and muscle. I believe there's a lot of conversation around strength, that people should just train to be strong and then mass doesn't matter. I disagree with that. I do think that on one hand, that decrease intramuscular adipose tissue, if we're going to meet people where they're at, is critical. On the same hand, the idea of it's like saving for retirement, putting as much muscle tissue down as you can will benefit all of these meaningful outcomes that we want. And so I do think that there is, again, beyond just the metabolic component, the sheer ability of mass and strength and maintaining those type 2 muscle fibers and building that is critical for aging. And, I joke, you guys were recently at a conference and you were talking about kind of like this biohack space without saying the biohacking space. And we're seeing kind of a shift. I think that when we were, I don't want to say younger, but maybe 10 or 20 years ago, people were talking about reading Muscle and Fitness and being jacked, and biohacking, this skinny drinking soy was like not a thing, right? I mean, don't hate me, but it wasn't. And now we're seeing this shift because we're entering this new era of being on the computer, sitting, we didn't have social media. You were strong and you were in it and you're at the gym, you're going to CrossFit, we're doing all these things. And what I imagine will happen is, as the biohacking community gets more attuned to bring back to mobility and strength, we're going to circle back to the foundations, which is what you and I believe in, to build for long-lasting legacy health.
So we have so much to talk about, including your new amazing book. But before we do that, we would be remiss in at least not touching on the nutrition piece, which is such an important, part of this whole muscle discussion. And, I don't even know how to sort of tackle this in a short amount of time. But what do you think we're getting
Yeah.
wrong from a nutrition standpoint still? Where do you see your patients struggling the
Mm.
most? And sort of what is your philosophy on nutrition and protein specifically?
Yes, I love this question, and I can get it done for you in 4 minutes or less. Are you ready? Now,
I'm so ready.
I am trained professionally in nutritional sciences by one of the world-leading experts in protein metabolism. What I am about to tell you, I will share where the evidence is and where my professional opinion is. There's a million different ways to do a nutrition plan right. However, there are a handful of core fundamental principles that we have to get right for the reality of where we live. So let's take a step back. The majority of people are overweight or obese, roughly 74% of the population. Most people, easily 50% of the population, does not meet the minimum exercise requirements. Why do I say this? Because all of this matters. Because it reflects the health of skeletal muscle, which is that intermuscular adipose tissue. The quality of that tissue is low. If we believe that obesity and sedentary behavior will mirror muscle quality, then I would say roughly 74% of people have unhealthy skeletal muscle. So when we talk about framing up a nutrition plan, we can't have some nebulous idea of who we're talking to. What's the reality right now? The reality is most people are eating between anywhere, let's just say 80 grams of protein a day. 80 grams of protein a day is above, quote, the minimum requirement to prevent deficiencies. Last time I checked, no one cares about that. We're not trying to be the bare minimum. So the minimum amount of protein, and again, this could be a nuanced conversation, but I only have 3 more minutes left. Dietary protein is the only and most important essential macronutrient as we age. You need more of it. You make a protein decision based on 3 things. Age, the older you are, if you are over 40, you need more protein. Number 2, if you are sedentary, you need more protein. And 3, if you are metabolically unhealthy, meaning you have elevated blood sugar, lipids, insulin, and are struggling with obesity, you need to reorient yourself to the idea that dietary protein is really important. Okay. As we think about how much we need in an overall period of time, the minimum for everyone listening is 100 grams of protein. Below that, it loses its metabolic effect. It does a whole host of other things. When you eat for muscle health, everything else falls in line. So a minimum of 100 grams. We need it for these essential amino acids. How do you, if you are sedentary and older, the worst of all worlds is to eat small protein, high carbohydrate diets, i.e. welcome to the food guide pyramid. Your first meal should have 30 to 50 grams of high quality protein. High quality protein include whey, lean meats, eggs, dairy, chicken. If you can kill it, if it flies, if it comes from an animal, it's considered high quality. This is not an emotional statement. This is just hard, fast biological numbers. That might be a little harsh. If you are vegan or vegetarian, then you can have a rice, pea, soy shake, add in some essential amino acids, and you're covered. You're now protecting muscle. You're also reducing appetite. You're increasing your will of, avoiding muffins and everything else. And you've stimulated your muscle in an appropriate dose to be able to help protect against aging. So if we just wanted to pick a number, 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of target body weight. That's protein.
And I love that 100 grand. I mean, we say like in our Star Out System program, we say 0.8 because we found that seems to be a number people can reasonably hit, right? And it's within that, which is, I think, twice the sort of recommended daily allowance, by the way, which again, we all agree is like,
I like
just
to flirt
survive.
with rickets
Yeah,
and
like, let's
scurvy. I
just
mean, those
survive.
minimums are good for
Well,
me.
we know that number is a completely irrelevant number, right? So everyone asks,
Yeah, it's
is
just random.
the RDA, are we eating? So the RDA, for those listening, is the recommended dietary allowance, which is based on nitrogen balance studies, which is from the early 1900s. And there's not one known to man health outcome from a nitrogen balance study. It's an irrelevant number.
You say that like it's
Yeah.
a problem.
It's an
Yeah.
irrelevant number. And the other thing, which I cover in the book, which is new and based on research, and we're going to be publishing a paper on this, is called carbohydrate tolerance. And this is new in the Playbook, which I'm really excited to share. It's this idea that we don't think about carbohydrates in an overall amount. we think about carbohydrates in a meal to meal amount. The average American eats 300 grams of carbohydrates a day. That's 3 oral glucose tolerance tests a day. Remember when you had babies and you had to drink that sugar? That's what people are doing. So the reality is, if you are sedentary and struggling with your body fat percentage, then you cannot dispose of more than 40 grams of carbohydrates in a 2-hour period.
Boom. I love this. I love these guidelines.
I love this. Okay, so I think you do talk about this in your new book. So I think I'd love to just switch over to deep diving, if we can, on the Forever Strong Playbook, which is the follow-up to your amazing book, which I mentioned earlier, New York Times bestseller. Congratulations, Forever Strong. And to me, I see this book as, Forever Strong was like the why you should care about muscle and the science behind it. And this is how you actually implement, and I don't know if this is the right word, like a muscle-centric lifestyle. Is that
Yes.
a correct
So this
description of this
playbook,
book?
basically, it's actually the first book of its kind. The final copy will be a bigger version with glossy pages, and it has illustrations, it has recipes, it has it's hardcover, and it is meant to bring with you. So it deals with everything that you could imagine. It has protocols for hot, for cold, for recovery. Again, it is the first of its kind, and it has mobility, foundational fives, how do we think about injury prevention, everything that I wish that I'd had in a first book, I put in this one.
Yeehaw.
Yeah.
This episode of the Ready State podcast is brought to you by Momentous. And as we are in January, a time when many of us are revisiting or recommitting to a health practice, I think it's so important for us to double down on talking about this idea of the Momentous standard.
Yeah, 100%. Look, we know if you're in this community, you're probably taking creatine, you're probably taking an omega, you may even have a protein powder. I want to say, okay, let's take the next step. You're doing the right thing. Let's start putting your money where your mouth is, and let's make sure the things that you're taking are safe. I think you wouldn't, when you just go into the wild west of supplements on Amazon where people are getting their stuff, or I got a good deal, or I like this cookie flavor, or they had it at Costco. I have to be straight up and clear. You absolutely need to make sure that your supplements are NSF certified so that what's in them is in there and they're not contaminated, and you're getting ethically, meaningfully sourced ingredients. That is the standard everyone should ascribe to.
Yeah, it's so interesting because the supplement industry is very lightly regulated, if at all. It's super easy and inexpensive to enter. The companies are not really required to disclose anything.
It's so sketchy.
They're not obligated to prove purity or accuracy. So it's interesting. We've been describing that as the supplement industry is a low trust category. And on the opposite end of that, Momentous's whole creed as a company is to be a high trust company. And what makes them different is NSF certification, transparency, sourcing the best possible ingredients out there. And I think that's why you and I feel so comfortable talking about these and recommending Momentous products and using them ourselves and letting our kids use them.
100%. And we know so many people who get blood tested for sports. Don't mess it up. If you want to learn more, go to livemomentous.com/TRS and use code TRS and save up to 35% on your first order.
Yeah. And I think we all know, there's so much information out there. And it is pretty obvious that just consuming more of it isn't changing people's ways. It's so much more complicated than that. It really is. People need a how-to manual, and I see this as such a vital how-to manual in a space where we still, I think we joke, we have a neighbor whose entire health practice is listening to podcasts about health, but he doesn't actually do anything. He just consumes information, and so he can talk about the latest and greatest science and information and what we're learning and how to live long, but that doesn't translate into action for him. So I think this book is just so important for that. So one of the things you touched on earlier that I know that you address as well in the Forever Strong Playbook is GLP-1s. This is just such a hot topic everywhere. And I know that you actually are, I don't know if I would say you're a fan of them, but you prescribe them.
I am a fan of them.
and you, I
Mhm.
think, are a fan. But they come with a like yes, but. And can you talk about what that
Yeah.
is and how to sort of avoid what we talked about earlier in the episode, which is this epidemic of sarcopenia, where we switch, we go from we trade one problem for another thanks to these amazing drugs.
So they accelerate muscle loss if you are not training and doing resistance, or if you're not doing resistance training and having enough dietary protein, they will accelerate muscle loss. And there's not something magical specific to muscle that happens. So I think that if we look at the evidence, it's not that GLP-1s are degrading muscle faster, it's that it allows for people to slow their gastric emptying, meaning they feel full longer. It allows them to restrict calories. And what happens is, I actually think GLP-1s are good for muscle because they can help decrease intramuscular adipose tissue. But without, the majority of people go off of them in 2 years. And we know that 96% of weight that is lost ends up being regained. And so, why is this a problem? Because it's not gained in muscle, it's gained in fat. And it will just accelerate the cycle earlier. But they can work great in lower doses, this idea of microdosing. There's a whole host of positive ways it can work. Just have to be really careful and understand that it's not a replacement for good habits and standards.
This conversation is so important. One of the things that we're talking about is we're talking about aging well, being useful, warding off morbidity and mortality. One of the aspects that I have to address all the time is we have a lot of joint pain. And, you know, we have now come to view osteoarthritis, really bad OA. These are metabolic diseases. These joints are just subjected to a lot of internal stress. Well, just was a nice way of putting it. One of the things that I think is lost in this conversation about muscle mass and strength is that we're looking at just back pain, low back pain.
Mhm.
The first time I read a paper, I think it's like 2004, and we're talking about people who had chronic low back pain, had these multifidi, which are muscles that are sort of next to the spine, everybody, and that they noticed is that people who had chronic back pain didn't move because they were in pain, and those muscles were infested with
Yes.
fat. They had a lot of this intramuscular fat, and it was an indicator of sort of loss of function. And more importantly, what we started to see is that people lost stability, they lost gapping, they lost sort of, we see that people who have unstable shoulders often have this thing called a sulcus sign, which is where the capsule is a little bit, the shoulder's a little loosey-goosey, you pull down the shoulder and you can see a little gap between the head of the humerus and the shoulder. And the solution for that is a big, beefy deltoid. So we don't even think about creating stability and less joint pain and less threat signaling to the brain. You're talking about covering a lot of issues, just getting people stronger. Could you talk just for a second? Let's say that I'm listening to this. I'm like, okay, I need to get strong. What does that look like? Because Peloton tells me it's do 100 reps, or I go to my spin class and it's 100 reps. And I love Pilates for all of its connective tissue and recovery and positional things. But I always say, hey, if you're gonna do Pilates, you need to swing a really heavy kettlebell and do some sprints too. What should someone look for in a muscle-centric strength program?
One, I love this question, and you're absolutely right. And we do see this in imaging. It's not just about progressive overload, it's really about progressive stimulus. And we recognize that everyone is in various um, points in their journey, whether they're beginner, intermediate, or advanced, and understanding that you do have to be strong and pacing it enough that your tendons and joints and ligaments are able to keep up, right? So we're hearing a lot of information in the landscape, and most of the training information is targeted towards the younger population. That my mom, who's 74, should go out and she should squat. Well, she does that, she's probably going to get hurt. But she can't just not move because I don't want her at risk for osteoarthritis or back pain. And that sedentary musculature does become weaker, less contractile, also poorer in metabolic health. So, in my mind, a well designed program has both strength, mobility, all of the components that are then incorporated into everyday life. It's not just about training in the gym, it is about um, training for life.
I love it. So I know that you've got to run, Two more questions if we could. If someone participates, like what's your hopeful outcome if somebody does your entire program in the Forever Strong playbook? Like what can people expect their life or body to be different following this program? Because I think it could be quite different.
Freedom, not just physical freedom, but mental freedom. The fastest way to become free is to move your body, and your mind will follow.
I love it. I love it. Well, I mean, I just want to say this book is amazing. We were lucky enough to get an early copy, and it's so practical and so valuable. And I really do think is such an important toolkit for people building a resilient body as they age. So thank you for writing it. And I'm so excited for it to be out in the world for everybody. Last question we ask all of our guests. We call it the infinite shelf. And if you could just tell us a book or show or piece of music that you are loving listening to and might recommend to your friends and our listeners that we can add to our
Okay, it's not Baby Shark. All right, just kidding. If you have not read the book Relentless, you should, by Tim Grover. Relentless or Winning, you have to read that book. Those books, those are books that I always refer back to. I love that. Yes, and that's.
I love it.
And if you're in the mood for a movie, 300's great.
Oh yeah, we love that movie. Okay,
I may or may not have touched Gerard Butler's book. There we go.
Last but not least, where can people find you, learn more about your book? I truly cannot recommend Forever Strong enough. I mean, to me, this is like a must-have.
Where do we pre-order this thing?
For anybody who cares about aging, and then anyone who wants to sort of put this to good use, the Forever Strong Playbook is definitely the perfect companion.
You can, first of all, I'm so grateful that you guys took the time to talk to me about this book, because it's something very meaningful. Again, we talk about protein, we talk about muscle, but what we're really talking about is building stronger, more resilient humans, and nobody knows more about that than you two. This book is available for pre-order now, and what people might not recognize is that if you guys order it now, first of all, there's a ton of free stuff that comes with it, but more importantly, it helps put wings to the movement of what we're doing, no pun intended, because it increases visibility for the book. And so, we're not just ordering a book, we're actually trying to support a movement. You can go to Amazon, you can go to Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold. You can find me on my website or Instagram handle at drgabriellelyon.com, plus my podcast, our newsletter, our YouTube, or Strong Medical, all of the things.
Perfect.
Thank
you so much.
We are so grateful for you being here and spending some time with us. We're such fans of your work, and this has just been a total delight for us.
Thank you so much.
Grateful. Thank you.
Hey, Kelly and Juliet here. If you're ready to feel strong, move freely, and have a body that's built to last for life, we've got something special for you, the STARAD system. It's our 12-week strength and lifestyle training program.
We designed it so you don't have to guess what works anymore. We blend strength, mobility, and recovery into one smart system that actually sticks. Over 12 weeks, you'll train with us and learn from our expert guests, build strength, lose the stiffness, wake up with more energy, and finally feel in control of your body again.
The first 2026 cohort starts January 12th, and early birds get $200 off.
If that sounds like your kind of move, go to thereadystate.com/system to apply. We'd love to help you show up stronger, more capable, and ready for anything life throws at you. Let's make it happen. We'll see you inside.